My name is Taylor Morgan. I am 24 years old. And until this spring, my life was defined by quiet diligence and a longing to belong. You wouldn't have known it from looking at me. But I was on the cusp of graduating from one of the country's most prestigious universities. The sort of place that draws names in marble and ambitions in steel. What people saw the reserved student who blended into lecture halls and libraries. What they missed the stubborn resolve beneath the surface. And the simmering wish for my family to finally see me for who I was. If you have ever felt invisible at your own family's table, you might recognize what comes next. My family. The Morgans. I have always been a picture of success, at least on the outside. My father, Charles, a respected surgeon turned hospital executive, was the sort of man who measured value by achievement and public recognition. My mother, Evelyn, commanded every room she entered. Then her laughter, bright but sharp as crystal. And then there was Jordan, my sibling, younger by 2 years, with the sort of effortless charm that drew people in like moths to a flame. Where I was quiet, Jordan was radiant. Where I won science prizes, Jordan dazzled at charity galas. I never begrudged them their applause. Not truly. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. The way my own achievements seemed to shrink in the family's collective memory. When Jordan won a local music competition, the family threw a dinner party for 40 guests. My own acceptance to the Ivy League brought little more than a nod over Evelyn's morning coffee. Of course you did. Dear, we expect nothing less from a Morgan. The message was always the same. Jordan was the future. The face. The heir apparent. I was the one they could rely on to do the work in silence. Never quite shining. Never quite enough. Looking back, the pattern is painfully clear. At 10, I spent weeks practicing a solo for the school's spring concert. The day before the event, Mother pulled me aside and explained gently that Jordan would be joining me on stage just in case I got nervous. I remember the applause, how it followed Jordan's bow. Not mine. At 12, when I was awarded a citywide math scholarship. My family arrived late to the ceremony. Their reason was simple: Jordan's tennis match had run over. You understand, don't you? Father said, as we left early. Missing the group photo. Family comes first. By 16, I had learned that my victories would always be measured against Jordan's. The summer I won a research internship unpaid. But fiercely competitive, I quietly took on a part-time job to cover expenses, knowing my parents were busy helping Jordan prepare for their international debate tour. Not once did I mention the shortfall. I simply learned to go without. As for birthdays and holidays, Jordan's wishes took precedence. There was the year my birthday dinner was cancelled when Jordan fell ill with a mild cold. The gifts rewrapped and repurposed for a later occasion. The cake left untouched in the refrigerator. These moments etched themselves into me. Not as single wounds, but as an ongoing lesson in where I stood. And yet, despite all of it, I kept giving back. When Father's investment in a real estate venture soured and left a gaping tuition gap for Jordan's first semester, it was me who quietly signed over the research grant I had earned. No one ever asked where the extra money came from. They never suspected the sacrifice. When Evelyn needed help organizing a charity auction, I spent nights drafting proposals and handling logistics. My name nowhere on the programs. My efforts explained away as family duty. When Jordan crashed their car during sophomore year, I negotiated with the insurance company, covered the deductible, and watched as my sibling posted photos of the new vehicle, thanking our parents for their generosity. I don't say these things to paint myself as a martyr. I did them because it was expected and because a part of me still hoped that if I gave enough, tried enough, belonged enough, someone would finally notice. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that our family was about to step onto a much larger stage. The university graduation was approaching, a grand event streamed online and attended by thousands. I had been chosen as valedictorian, with the promise of a $10 million foundation grant to continue my research, a prize that meant both prestige and security for years to come. It should have been my moment. But as my name appeared in the commencement program, as congratulations began to trickle in from professors and distant relatives, a strange chill settled in my chest. The Morgans had always protected their narrative, even if it meant rewriting someone else's story. And if you have ever had the feeling that a celebration was just a storm in disguise, then you'll understand why my hands shook every time I practiced my speech. I had no idea that the day I had waited for all my life would be the day I learned the true price of being a Morgan. The morning of graduation arrived beneath a low, gray sky, the kind that made the city seem hushed and expectant. I woke before dawn, the nerves in my stomach already alive and churning. On my nightstand sat my valedictorian sash, crisp and ivory, alongside a small note from Professor Levin, the only faculty member who ever truly believed in me. You earned this, Taylor. Don't let anyone take it from you. The apartment was quiet, almost reverent. Outside, the city bustled, horns blaring, people moving briskly to work and celebration alike. I dressed slowly, taking care to press my shirt, polish my shoes, and tie my hair back with shaking hands. By the time I stepped out into the street, the world felt charged, like the moment before a summer storm. Arriving at the graduation hall, the Morgans swept in like royalty. Evelyn's pearls caught the morning light, and Father's tailored suit looked sharper than I remembered. Jordan was radiant, dressed to the nines, their smile already perfect for the cameras. As if today's victory was inevitable, they greeted me with the usual mixture of pride and condescension. Well, this is it, Evelyn said, kissing my cheek with practiced affection. Just remember, Taylor, you only get one chance to make the family proud. Father placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. Let's keep it together out there. You have a habit of getting lost in the details. Speak from the heart, not just the head. And Jordan, always eager to twist the knife, leaned in with a grin. If you get nervous, just give me the signal. I'd hate to watch you freeze up in front of all those people. For a moment, I wondered if they saw me as anything more than a liability, a potential embarrassment to be managed. But I bit my tongue. This was supposed to be my day. The ceremony hall shimmered with banners, flower arrangements, and the glint of dozens of news cameras. The university president shook my hand, and the event coordinator gave me my cue card. I tried to focus on my speech lines I had rehearsed 100 times alone at night. With minutes to go, an usher hurried toward me with a pale face and a clipboard. Taylor Morgan, the dean would like to see you backstage. A pit formed in my stomach, but I followed. In a cramped office lined with diplomas and university crests, the dean sat flanked by 2 other administrators, their faces grave. We've received a serious allegation, the dean began, sliding a printout across the table. On the page was an email supposedly from a faculty member accusing me of plagiarizing parts of my thesis. I stared at the words, unable to breathe. This is absurd, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. My research has been vetted. This can't be real. We are not making any final judgments. The other administrator replied, avoiding my eyes. But in light of the situation, the board has decided to withhold your speech and honors until a review can be completed. I felt the ground shift beneath me, as if I'd stepped off a cliff. All I could think was, why now? Who would do this on this day? Back in the hallway, the ceremony music thundered. My classmates filed onto the stage, their faces bright with anticipation. I watched from the shadows as an announcer took the microphone. In light of unforeseen circumstances, the announcer's voice rang out. The board has chosen to recognize Jordan Morgan as this year's valedictorian and recipient of the $10 million Morgan Foundation grant. For a hard beat, the room fell utterly silent. Then applause erupted, led by Evelyn and Charles in the front row. Jordan took the stage, beaming. My vision swam as I saw my own name, freshly crossed out on the program, replaced by theirs. The news hit the crowd quickly. Phones lit up. Whispers snaked through the rows. On the big screens flanking the stage, my face faded out as Jordan's was projected in its place. Jordan's voice was smooth, full of the confidence I had never been allowed to claim. Thank you, President Howell. Thank you, Mother and Father, for always believing in me. This honor belongs to my family, who taught me that the Morgans always rise above. From the audience, I heard scattered laughter, some cruel, some merely confused. I stood frozen in the aisle, heat flooding my cheeks. Someone took a photo of me, my sash still in my hand, as if I'd arrived at the wrong party. Evelyn leaned over to the nearest reporter, her voice carrying. We had concerns about Taylor's readiness. It was for the best. Jordan has always been our brightest hope. And Jordan, as they accepted the award, looked directly at me, their eyes cold and triumphant. Some people are born for the spotlight. Others, well, they do better in the background. If you've ever tasted the bitterness of being erased from your own story, you know what it means to stand in a room full of people and wish only to disappear. I did not know then that humiliation was only the beginning. The storm had just begun. After the ceremony, the world outside seemed indifferent to my shame. The rain had started, tapping against the windows of the empty lecture hall where I found myself hiding. My gown and sash lay bundled on the seat beside me. As useless as the applause I'd once imagined, I replayed the last hour in my mind, searching for sense. My phone buzzed with texts, some from confused classmates, others from distant relatives who'd caught the news online. A few offered awkward condolences, but most simply wanted to know what had happened. There was no answer I could give that wouldn't taste like ashes. For the first time in years, I let myself cry quiet, careful tears, so no one would hear. I thought about all the nights spent studying, the money earned and handed over, the hope that if I just did everything right, someone would finally call me worthy. The hall door creaked open, and Casey slipped in, raincoat dripping. Casey had been my only true friend since our first year, someone who understood what it meant to be overlooked, to live life in the margins. Without a word, Casey sat beside me and handed over a still warm cup of coffee. I saw what happened. Casey said softly, "That wasn't right, Taylor. None of it." We sat for a long while in silence. Then, in a voice tight with anger, Casey added, "There's something off. I checked the program last night. Your name was printed everywhere. Then this morning, all the posters and screens had Jordan's name. That doesn't happen by accident. It was the first time all day that I felt the world tilt back in my direction. Even if only slightly. We started digging. First out of desperation. Then determination. Casey, ever the sleuth, pulled out their phone and began searching for anything odd: emails, group chat rumors, social media posts. It didn't take long. A screenshot surfaced in a campus group chat, an email, supposedly from Professor Levin, sent late at night, accusing me of plagiarism. But the email's formatting was strange. The signature not quite right. Casey raised an eyebrow. Levin signs every email with "yours in learning." This one doesn't. We went further. With a few whispered calls to classmates who worked IT, we found a camera recording outside the administrative office. A late-night visitor, a figure in a long coat, head down, was caught on tape, entering the building hours before the accusation was sent. Even more damning was what Casey found next: a video file, attached to a private cloud drive, labeled simply "backup." It showed Jordan and Evelyn in a heated whisper behind closed doors, their voices low but clear. Evelyn, "We do what we must." Jordan, "The board wants a Morgan in the spotlight. It's only a matter of timing." Jordan, "What if Taylor finds out?" Evelyn, "Taylor has always been too trusting. Leave the rest to me." The realization hit me all at once. I hadn't just lost a speech, I had been robbed of my dignity by the very people meant to protect me. But now, for the first time, I felt something stronger than humiliation: righteous anger. Casey squeezed my shoulder. "We can do this." That video, the email logs, everything, if we get it to the right people, they'll have to listen. We spent the night gathering evidence, compiling files, drafting statements. Casey called in a favor from a friend in the student press, who promised to push the story if we had enough proof. For the first time in years, I felt hope flicker back to life. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, I stood at the window watching the rain let up, city lights reflecting off the slick streets below. I realized I had spent my whole life waiting for my family to call me worthy. It was time to call myself worthy, no matter what happened next. If you've ever found yourself at the bottom, with nowhere to go but up, then you know there's a quiet power in having nothing left to lose. I promised myself come morning, the world would know the truth. By sunrise, the university was already abuzz with rumors. The administration scheduled a press conference to address concerns regarding the graduation proceedings. Invitations went out to faculty, students, reporters, anyone who mattered. I arrived with Casey at my side, heart thundering, but hands steady. The hall was filled with faces, some familiar, some hungry for scandal, all waiting for the university's answer. Evelyn and Charles sat near the front, Jordan radiant in the second row, confident and still basking in yesterday's applause. Their eyes slid over me, half pity, half smugness. The president began with a carefully worded statement, speaking of procedural integrity and recent allegations. I stood by the side, clutching a flash drive, the evidence we had spent the night compiling. When the floor opened for questions, Casey raised their hand and spoke, voice ringing through the hall. "There's something the board needs to see right now." With every eye on me, I stepped forward and handed the flash drive to the moderator. My voice did not shake. "I request that you review the following files before making any further statements. For the sake of fairness." They plugged the drive into the projector. First came the doctored email, quickly followed by the analysis that proved the sender's address was faked and traced back to a campus computer. used only by a handful of people. The IT report was clear and damning. Then, the video? The entire room watched as Evelyn and Jordan appeared on screen. Their conspiracy captured for all to see. Evelyn, we do what we must. Jordan. The board wants a Morgan in the spotlight. Jordan. What if Taylor finds out Evelyn Taylor has always been too trusting? Leave the rest to me. The footage finished. For a long, heavy moment, there was only stunned silence. Then, a surge of whispers, a collective gasp as everyone realized what had been done. Reporters immediately began firing questions. Was the university complicit? How long has this favoritism been happening? Will disciplinary action be taken? The board members huddled, pale and stricken. The president's voice trembling announced a formal review. Evelyn's face was frozen, her mask finally cracking. Charles looked away, jaw clenched. And Jordan, for the first time I could remember, seemed utterly lost, color draining from their cheeks. Students in the back began to clap slowly at first, then louder. The applause wasn't for Jordan or for any Morgan, it was for the truth coming out. For justice that had been so long delayed. The board reconvened on stage. And the president took the microphone. In light of overwhelming evidence, we are reinstating Taylor Morgan as this year's valedictorian and sole recipient of the Morgan Foundation grant. Furthermore, the university will initiate a full investigation into misconduct and will review disciplinary measures regarding the involved parties. Jordan stood abruptly, face mottled with humiliation. Evelyn tried to protest. This is a family matter, but her voice was drowned out by the rising chatter and the flashing cameras. I walked to the podium, head held high. The moment felt unreal. All the pain, the sleepless nights, the years of being overlooked melted away under the hot lights. I began the speech I had written alone in my small apartment. Voice clear and unhurried. I stand here not because of family name or fortune, but because I refuse to let others write my story. There are those who will try to take your light, to convince you that you are only worthy when they say so. But I have learned that true worth is not given it's claimed. Even when you stand alone. I looked at Evelyn and Jordan, at the rows of students, the flashing cameras, and to anyone who has ever been told to stay in the background, know this: your time will come. Claim your moment. The world needs your voice. As I finished, the room erupted in applause, this time for me. And for every person who had ever been left in the shadows. Outside, sunlight finally broke through the clouds. And for the first time, I let myself smile without apology. In the days that followed, I felt as if I were walking through the ruins of my old life. The air heavy with what had been lost and what could finally be built. My phone rang with unfamiliar numbers, reporters seeking comment. Distant relatives offering clumsy congratulations. Classmates who suddenly remembered my name. The Morgans, too, reached out. Charles left a voicemail. All formality and no warmth, suggesting that we keep family business private. Evelyn sent a bouquet of lilies and a note in her precise handwriting. Let's talk. Families recover from these things. I read the note, set it aside, and felt nothing but a quiet relief. For years, I had moved through the world, hoping to earn a seat at the family table. Now I realized that some tables are better left behind. I changed my phone number, quietly updated my address, and drew new boundaries, lines that would not be crossed. No matter the plea. As the scandal rippled outwards, the Morgans tried to patch their reputation with hasty apologies and claims of misunderstanding. Jordan issued a public statement. voice trembling with practiced remorse. But the damage could not be contained by spin or charm. On campus and in the press, the story became more than just my story. It was a lesson in favoritism and the cost of unchecked pride. Evelyn's emails to the university went unanswered. Charles, faced with questions from hospital colleagues, found his own name suddenly less powerful than he'd believed. Friends of the family who once smiled at me across dinner tables now sent cautious messages, some urging me to forgive and forget. Others admitting they'd always wondered if something was wrong behind the Morgan facade. I answered none of them. I felt, for the first time, the dignity of silence. I moved out of my childhood home, finding a small apartment near the edge of campus, a place with creaking floors, wide windows, and sunlight that streamed in at dawn. I filled the rooms with things that reflected my taste alone: secondhand books, old records, fresh flowers from the market. The walls echoed with a quiet that did not feel empty but instead invited me to build a life of my own design. Casey came by often, bearing groceries or coffee, refusing to let me retreat too far into solitude. Together, we celebrated the small victories: my first official paycheck from the research grant, an invitation to speak at a student conference, the email from Professor Levin inviting me to mentor the next class of scholars. At night, I learned to cook simple meals, music humming softly in the background. I began to sleep more easily, my dreams no longer haunted by accusations or the endless need for approval. I allowed myself, slowly, to believe that peace could become a habit as steady as any heartbreak. In time, I started to gather people around me who felt more like family than anyone sharing my blood. Casey, of course, became a constant, loyal as a lighthouse, wise beyond their years. A handful of classmates reached out, offering friendship without expectation or envy. I joined a local volunteer group supporting students from marginalized backgrounds, finding a sense of belonging in the simple act of giving back. There was Mrs. Hathaway, the retired librarian who lived across the hall, with whom I shared tea on rainy afternoons and stories from years gone by. There was Miguel, a fellow scholarship recipient, who understood the language of quiet struggle. Together, we built new traditions: potluck dinners, weekend hikes, the odd birthday celebrated with laughter and homemade cake. In this small, chosen family, there was no competition, no tests to pass. There was only acceptance and the slow, patient weaving of trust. I found myself laughing more, loosening my guard, even daring to hope that happiness steady, ordinary happiness might be something I could claim for myself. With the grant money secured, I started work on my research, an independent project focused on educational equity. Inspired by all the barriers I had seen and survived, I met with university officials and local leaders, using the scandal as leverage to start a fund for students who, like me, had been overshadowed or denied opportunities by family politics. The first donation, a check for $100,000, came from a stranger who had read my story online. I used every cent to create scholarships and mentorships for those who needed them most. The news covered the story in cycles. For a while, my name was everywhere: interviews, op-eds, TV segments. But with each passing week, the world moved on, and I was left with something far more valuable than fleeting fame: a sense of purpose, and the quiet confidence that I could weather storms without crumbling. One evening, near the end of summer, I took a long walk through the city. The air was heavy with the scent of cut grass and distant rain. I paused on a small bridge overlooking the river, the water below reflecting the last light of day. I thought about the Morgans, about everything that had been taken, and everything I had managed to salvage. I realized then that I no longer felt anger, only a gentle gratitude for the lessons I had learned. I had given them every chance to love me. Now, I would give myself every chance to love the life I was building. As I turned for home, I understood that forgiveness, when it comes, is not for those who have wronged us, but for ourselves. So we may finally move forward without looking back. 1 year has passed since that final public reckoning with my family. A full cycle of seasons marked not by loss, but by the slow and certain building of something new. I live now in a sunlit apartment on the top floor of a renovated building just outside the city center. My small balcony overflows with flowers and potted herbs. The paint on my walls is exactly the color I once dreamed of as a child. And the kitchen hums with the scent of morning coffee and possibility. Gone are the heavy silences of the Morgan house. Gone the anxious glances, the careful tiptoeing around invisible lines. In this space, I wake each day to gentle light and the quiet assurance that every corner, every picture, every book belongs wholly to me. My routines are simple. Steady sunrise at tea, time spent writing, long walks by the river, laughter that echoes through the open windows in the evenings. I am not waiting for anyone's approval now. My heart feels lighter than it has in years, less like a fortress, more like a garden, finally tended with patient hands. What I have gained in this new life cannot be measured by inheritance or prestige. It is found in the circle of people who fill my home with warmth, who show up with homemade soup when I am sick, who remember my birthday with silly cards and good stories. Casey has become family in every sense of the word. There is comfort in the way they knock on my door with 2 mugs and a listening ear, in the way they share both victories and disappointments without envy. My neighbor Mrs. Hathaway, now well into her 70s, has become my surrogate grandmother. She bakes bread for my friends' gatherings and brings me clippings from her favorite mystery novels. Miguel, always ready, with a joke or a word of encouragement, helps me run the mentorship program we've built from scratch. Most Saturdays, my living room fills with the laughter of students, young people from backgrounds not unlike mine. Some shy, some bold, all hungry for a chance to be seen. We cook, we talk, we plan for futures that were once unthinkable. The foundation I started has grown. Our first year, we awarded 10 scholarships, each one a lifeline for a student written off by their own family or circumstance. We've provided emergency grants, counseling, and above all, a sense that no one is truly alone if they have someone willing to believe in them. In my work, I have become more than a survivor of scandal. I am now an advocate for change. I speak at conferences, lend my story to panels on academic integrity and equity, serve as a mentor for the next generation of scholars. Sometimes, I am invited to keynote at events far larger than I could have once imagined: grand hotel ballrooms, crowded lecture halls. Yet, I am always most comfortable in the small moments: a late-night email from a student seeking advice, a handwritten thank you note from a parent whose child received a second chance. The research I once fought so hard to defend is now my legacy. Not because it was validated by a grant, but because it has become a tool to help others climb the same walls I once faced. Outside of work, I have discovered hobbies and friendships that make life rich in quieter ways. My hands have learned the feel of soil in the garden, the comfort of knitting scarves for winter, the joy of reading poetry aloud to friends on rainy afternoons. I travel when I want, never out of obligation, always with curiosity. I have come to understand that success Real success is not a prize handed down by family or institution. It is built one hard one day at a time. In the choices we make to be honest, to be kind, to be brave enough to begin again. As for the Morgans, news of my success eventually found its way back to them. Charles wrote once, his words stiff and formal, hinting at reconciliation. Evelyn sent a single email, a clipped apology buried in pleasantries. Jordan, after a brief flurry of public remorse, faded from the headlines and, so far as I can tell, from the spotlight they once loved so much. There have been invitations, holidays, family weddings, distant birthdays. I have not attended. My answers, when given, are polite but final. I wish them well, but I do not return. I do not need their validation. For years, I carried the ache of wanting them to understand, to approve, to care. Now, I am grateful only for what their absence has taught me, that real family is chosen, not inherited. That peace is sometimes found only after we set down the burdens others hand us. If you have walked a road like mine, marked by longing, betrayal, the slow breaking away, I hope you find some comfort in this. You are allowed to leave the tables that no longer feed you. You are allowed to build a new home from the rubble of old hurts. You are allowed to choose your family, your path, your story. Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads, forced to choose between the love you deserve and the love you were given? Did you ever find freedom in the most unlikely places? I invite you to share your story. There is power in speaking our truths, in learning from one another, in refusing to be written out of our own lives. Thank you for listening, for seeing me not as a headline, but as a fellow traveler on this long, beautiful road toward belonging. And if you have ever felt invisible, I promise you this, you are not. There is a place for you, and your story is far from over.